Let's talk about composition. The one thing every great photo has in common is the difference between taking a snapshot or creating a captivating photograph. But the problem is, when you start learning about composition, it's easy to get overwhelmed by all the rules. You've almost certainly heard of the rule of thirds, but then there's the golden spiral, phi grids, leading lines, dynamic symmetry, and the list just keeps going. The truth is, many of the most striking images out there don't even follow these traditional rules. In fact, they often seem to break them completely. So what's going on? Well, the answer lies in how our brains naturally process visual information. These photos aren't breaking the rules. They're using principles based on how we perceive patterns, relationships, and balance in an image. The good news, you don't need to memorize complex grids or ratios to take better photos. Today, I'm going to share 5 simple principles that you can start using right away. And the best part is, I'm not going to bore you with the rule of thirds. Instead, we're diving into practical tips rooted in how humans naturally see and interpret images. These principles will take your photos from good to jaw-dropping in just minutes. So let's see how they work. Continuity. Our eyes love to follow lines. They act like visual highways guiding us through an image. Think roads, rivers, railings, even different areas of light and shade. They're all tools you can use to lead your viewer's eye exactly where you want it to go. Naturally, your eyes will be drawn to the brightest part of the image. So you want to set up those lines to lead the viewer towards it. You can see in this image that I took on top of Ingleborough on a snowy day. There is a line that draws you right through. It's what they call an arabesque curve, but you don't need to worry about that. But it takes you to the brightest spot in the image. I'm just using natural and man-made things to help guide the viewer where I want their eye to go. You see, I'm using things like roads, pathways, and areas of different contrast. Now, if you can't naturally see these, don't stress about it. Just ignore everything else in your image and start to look for any lines, whether they're natural or man-made. When you nail this, your image becomes much more than a static shot. It transforms your photo into a visual journey. Lines such as roads, rivers, and so on, they act like visual highways. They pull the viewer deeper into the scene. This not only keeps them engaged for longer, but it helps them to explore the image in just the way you intended. For my second tip, I'm going to talk about symmetry. You know, when you look at an image and it just feels right, it feels balanced. That's because our minds crave order. You can use natural things like grids, or doorways, or a row of doors, or even a boat trailer. You can see I've combined the two in this image. Our brains are naturally drawn to images with symmetry because it reflects the patterns we associate with beauty and stability. By incorporating symmetry into your compositions, you tap into this innate preference, making your images feel calmer, intentional, and visually striking. For my third tip, I want to talk about a principle called closure. Your brain is amazing at filling in missing pieces. You don't need to show everything in your photo. The viewer's imagination does half the work. Take a look at this photo of this pregnant lady sat in a window. Perhaps she's dreaming of what it's like to be a new mother. But I didn't realize when I took this photo, actually her husband is lying on the floor out of sight and they're having a chat. But my imagination ran riot. And I just loved the picture without the rest of that detail because I could make up my own story. You can see it in some of these other photos too. This jockey, clearly she must be focusing on what is about to come, the race ahead. Or this girl walking across the field, what can she be thinking about? You can let the viewers make up their own minds. Less is very much more. If you use windows or doors or even shadows, like this girl sat here in the dark, it sparks curiosity and it'll keep your viewer engaged. This approach transforms a simple photograph into a visual story. It draws the viewers in encouraging them to linger longer in your photo as they piece together their own story or their own meaning for the picture. Now for my fourth principle, I'm going to talk about something called common fate. When objects move in the same direction, our brains automatically group them together, and motion blur can be a great and powerful tool in photography to take advantage of this. So next time you're capturing movement, slow down your shutter and let the action tell the story. If you haven't seen my video about Ivan Titarenko, I'll leave a link up here. He really was the master of this, and he took very long exposures of moving crowds. And I've tried to replicate it in some of my images here. You can see, although this is a protest march, there are lots of people moving in one direction, and I just wanted the eye to group them rather than focus on what the protest was about. I had another instance here with this guy. He stood outside the library. People were going in and out of the library all the time, and I didn't want them to distract with this chap having his phone call. And by having a longer shutter speed, he stayed pretty static. The rest of the crowds and people were moving in and out, and they just blur together and create that common fate of movement. So by capturing elements that move in the same direction or share a similar motion, you tap into how our brains naturally group and interpret movement. This makes the image feel more cohesive and dynamic, and it transforms a static photo into one that conveys action and flow. Now let's talk about my fifth and final point, which is figure ground. What I mean by that is how we separate our subject really from the ground around it. Our eyes will automatically separate the subject from the background, but if you can accentuate that, when you get this right, your subject will pop. There are several ways to do this. The most common technique is to use a very shallow depth of field, a very wide f-stop. But there are other ways, and one of the best ways I found is to incorporate some foreground right close up to your camera. It can be completely out of focus, so that your eye is drawn to the subject behind because it's sharp and it can recognize what that is. You can see that in this picture I took of Mary's shell, where I had a sculpture in the foreground, just there to create that separation, to give the subject some isolation. You can do this in a few ways. You can play with contrast, light versus dark, sharp versus blurry, as I've just shown you, or use depth of field to isolate your subject. It creates clarity and impact by making your subject stand out distinctly from the background. And that's what I've done here in this portrait shot of this lady. She was stood under the canopy of something like a woodshed. It's very dark behind her, and that's helped to completely isolate her from what else is going on, because she's got this perfect clear background with no distractions. And this principle taps into how our brains naturally separate elements in a scene, identifying what's important, the figure, and what's secondary, the ground. So let's have a quick recap. Continuity guides the eye. Symmetry brings balance. Closure sparks imagination. Common fate unifies movement. And figure ground makes your subject stand out. These aren't just random tips. They're rooted in how our brains process visual information. Now you have the tools to create stronger and more compelling images. If you're ready to level up your photography, I've got something special for you. I'm opening up 5 free consultation calls to help you craft a personalized plan to take your skills to the next level. So if you're struggling with your camera settings, maybe your composition, or just trying to figure out your style, we can tackle it together. Come up with a plan that's customized to you, and it's all free. Spots are limited. Click the link below. It's in the first line of the description. But book yours now before they're gone. And that's all for this video. Hope it helps you with your composition, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.